I'm Olivia, and I haven't done this in months. So let's see how it goes. Neil is sneezing in the background there. Um, this is my recommendation channel. Bless you. This is my recommendations channel. We're doing books right now because I don't have the technical savvy. Okay, come on. I don't have the technical savvy to do any like movies or anything, and I don't have the pull and hi, audience size to like say, hey, can I promote your restaurant, bookstore, small yarn store, whatever, on my YouTube channel yet. I'm hoping I'll get there someday. So, since it's been so long and I've been procrastinating, it's been a mess. Mila's been a little itchy today, so I bathed her. So hopefully she won't be itchy while we're filming. If she is itchy, then I guess it's time. It wasn't that she needed a bath, and it's time for flea medicine. We'll see how it goes. I've been procrastinating for such a long time that I posted a picture of all the books I've read that I haven't filmed. In fact, I think this was January's Fantastic Strange Thing Book Club pick. I think so. It was January's or February's. Anyhow, I'm filming this in May, so that shows you how long it's been. I'm going to put my other script back here just so I have less to wrestle with. Okay, now it's on the floor. So, as you can see, this is Lost Lambs by Madeline Cash. I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed this one 9 pages worth. So, we're going to read my script, then I'm going to do another book, which will be coming out next week, which is Piranesi. And that one, I have a small script for, then I'm hoping to do a couple more, and those I'm going to kind of have to spitball because I've just been so blah about filming that I'm hoping that I haven't even written the scripts for them yet. So let's see how much filming I can get done today. So we're going to start with Lost Lambs. I wrote this as I was reading the book rather than having to read the book twice. I said, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to write the script as I read the book. I was waiting till I was sure I liked the book before I committed to a script, but that ended with me needing to read every book I like twice. Maybe if I launch a Patreon someday, I'll do videos for the books I didn't like. I'm going to see if I read more books this year that way. My TBR pile is a disaster right now. I usually post it. I've actually worked my way through most of what was there, but I've bought more books since then. I've got the TBR pile I've got now goes back to July of last year. So I got kind of caught up. So, Lost Lamb starts in a gnat-infested church. Little insects. Throughout the book, every time the letters N, A, and T come together in that order, there's a G in front of it, like national. GNATIONAL. And frankly, I guess it's a throwback to this, maybe. Or maybe Cash did a search and replaced too far. I guess we'll see. Anyway, the priest at the church, Father Andrew, is visited at confession by the youngest Flynn daughter, Harper, who tells him that she's bored and she's committing crimes, and that her father is suicidal, and also that she's a liar. Father Andrew knows that Harper's father, Bud, is being suicidal is not a lie, because Bud has come by recently to ask if suicide really is a mortal sin. After Harper leaves, we go to Bud, who's about to go and drive his family down off a cliff, only he hasn't left his driveway yet. His middle daughter, Louise, comes outside and asks him what they're having for dinner. He doesn't know. He then considers the state of his marriage. You see, he and his wife have opened their marriage, which is just going to be an extra breakup with extra steps, as he's not really enthusiastic about this plan. Now, I know people who are in open relationships, and generally, yeah, that's what I've seen. If you're not really on board with this, if this is not too enthusiastic, it's just a breakup with extra steps. His wife, Catherine, has been having an affair with their neighbor, Jim Doherty. Bud gives the car keys to Louise, knowing he won't be killing himself today. We turn to Catherine, that's the wife, next. When she and Bud met, Bud was playing in a rock band, and she was an aspiring photographer. They had a wild, passionate relationship until she got pregnant with Abigail, their eldest daughter. After that, Bud got a day job at Alabaster Harbor, and they bought a house and got all domesticated. We see the background of her relationship with Jim Doherty. They started knowing each other casually, but he encouraged her to return to photography, then encouraged her to take art photographs of herself in various stages of undress, and the rest is history. We go to Harper then, whom I suspect is going to be our main character. Thomas, my ex-husband, was reading a thing one time on structuring a novel which said the main character is the first or last character you see. Not all books follow this pattern because, we don't see Frodo first or last in The Lord of the Rings. I don't think. I have to go back and look. I'm pretty sure So, in this book, I guess the first character we see is Father Andrew, but he's talking to Harper, so that's close enough. Unless it turns out that Father Andrew is going to come from behind main character. We get Harper's backstory here. Harper is a gifted child with talents for math and for languages, at the very least. She taught herself Latin, Russian, Korean, and ASL. For those not in the U.S., that's American Sign Language. She also hacked into her dad's email and work computer and found out that not all the shipments through Alabaster Harbor were logged correctly. When she points this out to her dad, Bud says the whole system's automated and he doesn't really have to do anything but watch it work on its own. Next up is Abigail. We find out about her penchant for drugs and alcohol, and also how she met her boyfriend, known as War Crimes West, for whatever it was he did when he was deployed. A month before the action of the book begins, Abigail and her friend Tibet snuck into a party at Paul Alabaster's house, where Wes was acting as security. Paul Alabaster's going to be our antagonist here, where Wes was acting as security. There, a man known as Dolt hits on Abigail, but backs off when he discovers how young she is. When the book starts, Abigail and Wes are going on / coming back from their third date, where they spent the whole night driving around aimlessly. Abigail comes home, has a glass of her mother's vodka, and then goes to school. We turn next to the middle daughter, Louise. Louise is undistinguished compared to her sisters. She's not a criminal genius like her younger sister, or a Model S druggie like her older sister. She's just Louise. She does have an online boyfriend, though, known only as yours truly, who has a very strong religious faith and wants her to help with some goal he has. Abigail suggests that Louise pick an activity from the activity sport at church and make that her whole personality. Louise chooses the church's inner beauty pageant, only watches out because the closest thing she has to a talent is being able to hold her breath until she passes out. But that's okay. Yours truly has a plan. All she needs is potassium perchlorate and aluminum. We shift back to Bud next. This is a pretty long chapter. Also, I just noticed the summary inside the cover says overtly what I'm hinting at the previous paragraph. But never mind, we'll still go forward with hints. Back to Bud. Bud is called into his boss's office after a little chat about some escaped prisoners. I'm putting this here because maybe it'll turn up later. Then they tell him they're concerned about him. He hasn't been himself lately. They're particularly concerned that Bud has put his marital status as that his wife is effing his neighbor. They tell him that if he wants to keep his job, he needs to get help with the things he's struggling with. He chooses a support group called Lost Lambs that meets at the church. Notice how there seems to be only one church. Now, I grew up in Chicago, as most of you know, and it's going to turn up in one of the books we're going to do pretty soon. The Chicago area. And there is a little area of Chicago called Pullman, and that was a company town for the people who make the Pullman train cars. And they did just have one church. Mr. Pullman, whose name escapes me at the moment, knew that a town needed a church, so he built a church out of greenstone. It's a real pretty church. I don't know what's in there right now, but they just kind of picked a religion, picked a denomination, whoever most of the people who worked for Pullman belonged to, I think, and that was just what the church was. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe this is based on Pullman, and that's why they only have the one church. So Bud goes to his first meeting, and after noticing that the church is a hive of activity, including an apparently perennial fundraiser to fix the church's bells, and that the church is also infested with gnats, he leads off by telling the group about Catherine and Jim. The leader, Miss Winkle, I know we get her name eventually. I can't remember what it is right now. It's been a couple months. Who was the woman who brought the plant that brought in all of the gnats, and who's the single mother of a special needs child named Perry, tells Bud to come prepared to play something on the guitar at their next meeting. Bud goes home, and Catherine tells him she's taking up art again, that she and Jim have not consummated their relationship yet. Bud goes out and gets drunk, gets thrown out of Jim's bar, and then ends up at Miss Winkle's house where intimacy takes place. First, now we're back with Harper. The town square is home to an art installation of gigantic cedar balls, which over time have become infested with termites. The town decided to fumigate and destroy the balls. Harper's distressed because she believes that the balls, which were donated by the Alabaster family, are full of recording devices that are spying on the people of the town, and the destruction of the balls will destroy the evidence. She bumps into Perry Winkle, Miss Winkle's special needs daughter, who's upset that they're destroying the balls because termites have feelings. Harper posts about her suspicions on the school's free speech board, which causes her to get suspended. Her parents will have to send her to a wilderness school for a week to prove to the school she'll be attempting to improve her behavior. Next, we're back to Abigail. The Biddle twins, Millie and Maxine, have taken to harassing Abigail about her romance with Wes. When Wes fails to come pick her up after school, the twins give her a hard time. And Abigail punches Millie right in the nose, breaking her nose and blackening her eyes. Meanwhile, Wes is increasingly concerned about Paul Alabaster's behavior. Paul has always been weird, but now, even for Paul, he's weird. Wes hires a fixer to research Paul, and he happens to see an invitation to a party that Paul's having. The invitations are addressed to a bunch of businessmen and to Abigail. We go to Miss Winkle next. She gets a great deal of satisfaction from her activities, from leading lost lambs, growing her orchids, and raising her daughter. Sleeping with Bud, on the other hand, exhilarates her. She arrives at the church to find a fumigation tent over it. Father Andrew has decided to get rid of the gnats once and for all. Will the spelling of words with N-A-T continue to be spelled with G-N-A-T, though? I guess we'll find out. Perry's distressed by this because the gnats are also living things with feelings. Miss Winkle has her meeting of the lost lambs in the garden of the church, since they cannot use the inside. Meanwhile, Harper has arrived at the wilderness program. Their personal belongings are taken from them when they arrive, and they can earn them back by either good behavior or showing vulnerability. Harper starts out by telling them that she and her family are being spied upon by the Alabaster family. The day she wins a desiccated brownie by admitting their parents' extracurricular activities make her unhappy is a turning point. Her period starts the next morning, and when she leaves, she admits that she didn't know as much as she thought she did. It was it was very enlightening. Bud finally brings his guitar to the Lost Lambs meeting and agrees to bring his daughters out to clean up the beach. While at the beach, the girls confer about their father's affair with Miss Winkle and discuss their mother's affair with Jim. This is where Act 2 starts, I think. Bud decides he wants to take Miss Winkle somewhere romantic, but to do that, he needs money. His company offers a bonus for Employee of the Month, and so Bud decides to really impress his boss. He brings flowers to his boss's secretary. She's allergic. And he decides to follow through on Harper's discovery about the unlabeled shipments and discover there are a number of them going back for years. He brings this to his boss's attention, and rather than being appreciative, Alan advises Bud to forget about it. When he doesn't agree to do so, at least in part due to Miss Winkle's influence, he gets invited to a meeting the next day at work. Catherine is planning a romantic getaway with Jim when he decides to show her his most precious artwork, sculptures of the genitalia of every woman he's ever slept with. This is a huge turnoff for her, and she breaks off the relationship. She decides at this point to become the perfect wife to Bud until she realizes that he's been taking advantage of their open relationship. She then decides to go on the romantic weekend she was planning with Jim all by herself. Next, we're back to Abigail. She and Tibet are having a little drink and a little smoke and taking deworming drugs for apparently some kind of high. And Abigail tells her she's been invited to that party. She plays it off like she might go, but she's already planning out what she's going to wear, expecting it to be fairly exciting, and figuring that Wes will be there to help her and keep her safe. Meanwhile, we're at the mysterious meeting that Bud was going to after work that day, and it's apparently with Paul Alabaster himself. I think this is the first time we've seen Paul, and I'm not spoiled for anything, but it's really giving vampire. Though maybe that's too obvious. He's pale and apparently never seen outside in the daytime. The house he's living in dates back to the 18th century. It's made of historic stone from other buildings, and it's slowly sinking into the ground. And at one point in the meeting, he says he founded the town when it's supposed to have been his father who founded the town. I mean, there was one book where it was like, oh, vampires, and it totally wasn't. I will do that book someday as well. In the meeting with Paul Alabaster, Paul literally tells Bud not to worry about the unlabeled cargo, and that he wants a loyal employee rather than an ethical one. He also invites Bud for dinner, consisting of an endangered fish, and when Bud gets escorted home, he's handed a plate under a metal cloche. I always think of those hats from the 20s when I hear the word cloche. Apparently it's one of those metal covers that goes over, I mean, kind of a similar shape, so maybe. But anyhow, on the plate is the endangered fish in question, along with a large check. He takes the endangered fish into the kitchen where he dumps it into the sink, and I'm still not sure about that. I mean, we have garbage disposals here in Texas, so maybe you can go down the garbage disposal, but it seems like a lot of garbage not to go down the garbage disposal, particularly since I'm picturing a whole fish with bones and all. Maybe it's just like a fillet. I don't know. It seems kind of odd, but he dumps it into the sink. And finds that Catherine's sitting there. They say some nasty things to each other about this open relationship thing. Catherine accuses him of being with Miss Winkle, and he doesn't disabuse her of the notion. He tells her that he's just doing what she's doing, and she tells him that she hasn't done what he thinks she's been doing. And then they seems to be unpleasant sex, but what do I know? I'm Ace. and she asks him to call off the arrangement. We switch to Wes's perspective. He's doing his rounds at the estate, and his fixer calls him and tells him to meet him at a Chinese strip joint in a strip mall and make sure he's not followed. When they meet, the fixer has a picture of men wearing Venetian masks, the fancy ones from and an unconscious woman tied to a chair. He's told the initials of the women are AB, and that one of the men is Paul Alabaster. The other one is the man who let Abigail into the party way back when, who just went by the name of Dold, and his name is actually Dr. Orson Lancaster. And the third is somebody that Wes does not recognize. And when he asks the fixer says it's a holy man, in quotes, known as Father Andrew. When Wes returns to work, his car doesn't work on the gate, and he pages on the little earpiece they have that needs to be let into the gate, and they tell him they're not going to let him into the gate because his employment's been terminated. Next up is Father Andrew. We've had I don't know if we've had him something really from his perspective since the beginning of the book. They're having a harassment seminar where they're being shown not to touch people and things like that. They ask him how he came to be a priest, and he told them that a friend, who was a priest, gave him some help, and he decided to follow in that friend's footsteps. Then we get his actual thoughts. He and his girlfriend at the time were traveling in South America at night and heard a thump. And rather than going back to see what it was, he just assumed it was a tree root or an animal or something. After he moves to town, he's approached by Paul Alabaster, who asks him to sort of be his personal spiritual guide. And when Father Andrew says he's not interested in that, Paul Alabaster says, well, I think people would be interested in hearing about a certain case of vehicular manslaughter in South America. So, fully blackmailed, he goes ahead and agrees to be Alabaster's personal spiritual advisor. We also find out the reason they're continually having fundraisers to fix the church bells is because the church bells drive Father Andrew batty, and so he keeps misappropriating the funds to fix the bells. Cool. For the next section, it's mostly Bud's perspective. We're given a couple other people thrown in there. Bud decides to take some of the money from the bribe that Paul Alabaster gave him and take the girls to visit his dad. Catherine suggests they become a throuple with Miss Winkle, but Bud's not sure he's on board with that. Bud decides to take the girls to visit his father, and they go to the airport, and everybody gets their boarding passes, and they go through security, and when they scan Louise's boarding pass, it lights up a different color because she's on the no-fly list. They get pulled enough, and sure enough, it's accurate, she's on the no-fly list. So they go home, and Bud goes up to the treehouse, to the girls' treehouse, and discovers a whole bunch of deconstructed pressure cooker and things like that, and he asks what it is, and she tells him that it's a weapon, and that she was going to use it at the inner beauty pageant. She says that they caught the boyfriend, yours truly, and he had to give up a list of names, and one of the names he gave up was hers. Bud pulls a cigarette out of his packet and out of the packet in his pocket, and Louise recommends he not light it in the treehouse. Next up, we're back with Catherine. She's freaking out about what's going on with Louise, as you can understand. Excuse me. Crap. I just got a phone call. I want to hope they didn't show up. That Catherine's still freaking out what's going on with Louise, and she hyper-focuses on fixing the downstairs bathroom. The plumbing is broken, there's mold, it's gross. She's thinking that maybe the mold in the bathroom is toxic, and that's what's causing all of her daughters to end up so maladjusted. She finally prevails upon Bud to pay for a renovation of the downstairs bathroom, and she goes to the little community board thing they have and chooses a contractor named Remy. One of the other moms says she'll like Remy, in a sort of insinuating voice, leading Catherine to imagine Remy as some Latino handyman, and she fantasizes about spicy times with Remy. Catherine is very surprised to find out that Remy is a woman who looks like she could be a model. Remy turns out to be very good at what she does. She takes care of all the plumbing and electrical stuff, and then they start talking about what they're going to do with the cosmetic things. Meanwhile, Louise is going to community service and therapy, and she's now the second of their daughters to be suspended from school. Catherine asks Remy how she ended up being a contractor, and she said she was a contractor, and her father was a contractor before her, all the way back to an ancestor who was a Soviet peasant. Remy says that she found a bag of random pills in the bathroom, and Catherine's all, I don't know about where those pills came from. And Remy's like, I don't actually care if you know what the pills came from. But they decide to take some. They have a little glass of wine, and one of the yellow pills and one of the blue pills. I think they're probably, these are the dewormers. So they get a nice little high from this, and they end up standing pretty close together, and Catherine kisses Remy, and Remy's okay with that. So I guess Catherine's finally getting what she was looking for in their opened up relationship. Let's see where that goes. Now for something completely different. Tibet. All of Tibet's family, their names come from where they were conceived. So Tibet is pretty self-explanatory. She also has a little brother named Phoenix. Tibet decides she's going to save Abigail from whatever's going on with this party that she's been invited to. She gets hopped up on goofballs and hits the internet conspiracy boards. She asks what people know about Paul Alabaster, and there's a lot of stuff about Paul Alabaster and other billionaires drinking the blood of virgins and things like that. And she's combing through all the things, trying to figure out what's the truth and what isn't. Tibet is planning on going to a fancy college, and she knows Abigail won't be able to get into her fancy college, but she kind of wants for Abigail to attend school near each other, because even though Abigail keeps giving her a hard time for not knowing what love is, Tibet admits she loves Abigail and will do anything to protect her. Next up is Wes, who has not told Abigail that he's been fired, which is going to be kind of fun, because what's going to happen? I hope he tells her before the party that she's assuming he's going to protect her at. So he meets the fixer, who meets Wes at the waterfront, and shows him a shipping container that is pried open with a crowbar. They go into the container and see it's filled with food, and the walls are covered with little hash marks counting off the days. But that's not the only marking. The actual words Cash uses are crescents of little fingernails. Now, Harper and Louise are both on house arrest. Their parents have taken away their phones, and Louise is legally forbidden to leave the jurisdiction. While their parents are out with their new significant others, Bud with Miss Winkle and Catherine with Remy, their phones start ringing. After the ringing has been going on for quite a while, they decide to risk the wrath of their parents and answer the phone. It's Tibet, who says that she believes Paul Alabaster is running a child trafficking ring, and that Abigail is their next victim because she's gone to that party. Of course, Abigail does not know that Wes is no longer working at Alabaster Harbor because Wes hasn't told her, so the girls find Wes's address. They go to his apartment and tell him that Abigail has gone to the party. So Wes and his roommate Marshall grab a gun, a fairly large one apparently, and load up the truck. They put the girls in the back and make them swear not to leave the truck and go to try to rescue Abigail. While Wes and Marshall in the house, the girls are not about to sit around and wait for somebody else to rescue their sister. They go in the other way and see if they can find her. What they find is Father Andrew. Father Andrew tries to get them to leave, and they refuse to because they've got to find their sister. So now we're with Abigail, seeing what's going on with her at the party. She rides a bicycle into town, catches a bus, and climbs the hill to the mansion. She's led into the house, and Dolt takes her to Paul Alabaster's office, where he starts explaining what they're doing. Abigail hears a noise behind one of the doors, and Paul tells her that he has his dogs locked up there. He gives her a drink with a fetal crocodile inside the ice cube, and tells her what they're doing. Apparently there's some kind of study they did where they tried tethering an old mouse to a young mouse in hopes that the young mouse would make the old mouse younger, and instead both mice died. But they're doing something similar for humans, and they want to collect her blood for it. Now, we've all heard this. This is, of course, Brian Johnson with his kid's blood. She refers to it as vampirism, and they say it's more like mosquito does. She wants to get out of there, but discovers she's paralyzed, and it turns out that the crocodile in the ice cube excretes a substance that paralyzes you. Paul and Dolt take some of her blood and drink some of it out of chalices, and they tell her that the paralytic will wear off in about half an hour and throw it into the room where the dogs are contained and lock the door. Now, Wes is going through the house, and there's this weird chanting and strange people in masks and organ music and a choir. Marshall's really freaked out, but Wes admits that it reminds him of church, and he kind of enjoys the ceremony of church. They eventually find Harper and Louise and are very upset that Harper and Louise are running around inside the house. The collected men drink some dark red liquid out of a chalice. Meanwhile, Harper and Louise tell Wes and Marshall they need to go to Paul's study because that's where Abigail is. So they go to Paul's study. They know the alarm's going to go off and they're going to have to get out fast. So they use the gun to shoot the lock off the door, proving the checkoff was right. A noise in the closet leads them to find Abigail in the closet, and she admits that she's paralyzed, and they ask, well, then who made the noise that we heard? And she said they did, and you see 20 pairs of eyes. You know, if you've ever seen the bicycle tour sketch of Monty Python, you'll recognize this reference to a reel being missing because there's a reel missing. We pick up action from Buz's perspective back at home where Harper's carrying 6 large pizzas through the house. She lets her dad know there are 10 Albanian girls living in their TV room right now, and that Abigail had been drugged, and Louise went to get more food for the Albanian girls that were locked in the closet with Abigail. Harper points out that she did tell him there was something fishy going on with those shipments, and Bud is consumed by guilt at having taken payola from Paul Alabaster to cover up his child trafficking, even though it wasn't that kind of trafficking. It was more medical trafficking. But it is what it is. When Catherine comes home, she finds out the money they used for the renovation and the failed trip to visit Bud's dad came from a payoff from Paul Alabaster. Bud goes to Paul Alabaster's house. There's a phone on the floor which rings, and he answers it. It's Alabaster trying to talk to him specifically. Bud and Catherine have called the police, and as they're talking on the phone, the sirens are getting closer and closer. Paul tells Bud that Paul is going to get away unscathed, even though the police are closing in on him, and then he hangs up. And Bud takes one of the paintings off the wall, and then he walks outside to meet the police. So now we're wrapping up. We've got Catherine's perspective, a little bit of Abigail. Catherine is accepting that she's always wanted to do something important, and that being mom's an important thing she's done. And now she's in an ongoing relationship with Remy, and Bud is still with Miss Winkle. That was kind of a relief to me. I really liked Bud and Miss Winkle as a couple, and I was kind of afraid they'd break up. Dolt and Father Andrew have both disappeared, and Father Hayworth, who's married his boyfriend, has been named pastor of the church. Bud decides to take Miss Winkle out of town for a romantic getaway, and Catherine promises that she and Remy will take care of Perry so they can have some alone time. It turns out that Perry fits in really well with the family. They play board games, have a good time. Abigail invites Wes to go to the senior dance with her, and he does, and they say they love each other for the very first time on the dance floor. It's all very uplifting. Marshall advises Abigail that whenever the memory of the trauma she has experienced comes up, she shouldn't try to talk to a counselor or anything. She should just bury it. And she does. Every time it surfaces, she buries it. We turn to Louise at this time, since that particular religious flavor didn't work out for her. And she really misses yours truly. She realizes that she mostly misses having a boyfriend. She has to do community service, which ends up being at a Jewish community center. When she's looking at a copy of the Torah, a boy about her age comes by and says that he goes to her brother's school, and he's there to visit his Bubba, which, means grandmother. And so she meets his Bubba, who likes her and tells her all about Jewish history. Louise decides she'll join any religion that'll provide her with a boyfriend, and it looks like Judaism's the winner. When Bud asks him to join some activity, she can't go on Saturday because it's the Sabbath, and she's not eating bacon anymore. And she admits that she's got a boyfriend who, as far as she knows, is not part of an online terrorist organization, and she ends by saying she needs a mezuzah. We end the book from the perspective of Miles, Jim Doherty's son. Jim was the failed romance affair. Jim and Miles are at a restaurant called Lucky Panay, which is ostensibly an Italian restaurant, but you get all kinds of cuisine there. The Flynn family arrives to celebrate Harper's birthday, and Jim is full of bitterness about the fact that his relationship with Catherine didn't work out, and that Catherine's with a woman now. And that Bud has found happiness with Miss Winkle, which they mentioned that she's overweight. I didn't catch that before, and it didn't seem important. Louise's boyfriend joins them then, and Louise explains that she's Jewish now, and Abigail is there with Wes, and they're all sitting around. They've ordered different cuisines. Oh, I forgot to mention that Paul Alabaster said that Harper was right, and the cedar balls did have listening devices in them. They ordered different cuisines, and Miles is struck by how, even though they're all a bunch of weirdos, they seem happy. They seem warm and full of love for each other, which is not an experience that Miles has really had. His dad's such a negative person and so judgmental, particularly of the Flynns. Catherine and Remy are going to redo the kitchen next, and Abigail and Wes are happy, and everything's warm, and Jim keeps getting up to make phone calls. Eventually, the Flynns invite Miles to join them, and Miles basks in the warmth of the family's love for each other until his dad comes and makes him leave. I really enjoyed this one because, I always had a theory that most families' dysfunction comes from pretending to be normal. Once you embrace the weirdo freak that you really are, everything else kind of falls into place, and it frees you up to be the weirdo you really are. So I'm glad that Madeline Cash agrees with me on that, right? Now I got a phone call from one of my dad's doctors while I was filming this, so I hope you consider checking out this book. And I totally forgot to warn you when the spoilers were coming. Too late now. So we'll just go from here, and I will see if the phone number of the doctor showed up on my camera. I don't think it did. We'll find out. If I did, I don't know what I'm going to do because I haven't figured out how to edit videos yet. I guess I'll have to learn how to edit videos, and then I'll see what's going on with the doctor, and I'll see you all next week for Piranesi, I'm thinking.